Firstly, a quick update for those of you wondering about the Awakening situation. Yeah, as much as I want to go back to it, and trust me, I really do want to go back to it, I'm just as annoyed as you are that I haven't been updating lately, but blame my university. They decided to literally zerg rush me with assignments in the last few weeks of term. The plus side is I don't have exams, but the minus side is, in the last 2 weeks, I basically have 10 assessments that are all due at the same time, so I've basically been perpetually working, and I really have no time to record at all. So you'll have to be patient with me. In 2 weeks at the very most, I will have absolutely no uni work at all, and then I'll get back to Awakening. But until then, let's have some Fire Emblem IF information. I wanted to make another one of these videos once I saw some new info come out, and I was waiting until we had higher quality scans, because Famitsu did leak, but we don't seem to have got the actual real high quality pages yet. But I'm gonna have to do it anyway now, because I've waited far too long. So, information, there's quite a lot of it. Firstly, this artwork has surfaced of Elfie, the female armor knight from the Nor side of the campaign. We've seen her a few times in battle, but we've never seen her actual portrait before, so she looks kind of interesting. We don't really know all that much about her, although there was a bit of a brief bio given on her character. Let's see if I can find it. Elfie, here we go. A knight who serves Nor's Princess Elise. Ugh, I hate those two words used in the same sentence. Sonic 06 flashbacks, but anyway. Contrary to her appearance, she possesses amazing strength, never misses training. Sounds, quite a bit like Sully or even Kagel, actually. And speaking of which, I hope she does follow after Kagel as far as female armor knights in the series go, rather than, Meg and, who was the other one again? Wendy, that's right, Wendy. Yeah, let's just hope that she's not like Meg and Wendy. Apart from that, and I'm just going to go back to the generic background now, because we don't have any actual pictures to accompany this, but apparently the Famitsu interview that we previously saw was not actually the full interview. Famitsu only published a short portion of it. The full version was found on the official Fire Emblem IF website, and it contains a fair bit more details than we had before, so I'm going to go through a few of these. Firstly, the developers, interestingly enough, clarified Phoenix mode, because of course it's causing enormous amounts of controversy, presumably in Japan too. The developers were pretty quick to clarify that it is actually possible to lose in Phoenix mode. It's not like the game is completely 100% effortless. You can still get a game over in Phoenix mode, they point out. Presumably the main character dying is still a game over. I'm not sure about any of the siblings though, because from what people have speculated, a lot of the siblings, as in the 4 siblings from each country, seem to have a crown icon on their portrait like the Avatar, implying that they too will also give a game over if they die, and Aqua does as well, which means that on each route there'll be a total of 6 characters who give game overs if they die, if things work like they do in a lot of other games. Now, what I'm wondering is, that might be okay for Classic mode or maybe even casual, but for Phoenix mode, which is specifically designed for newcomers, 6 characters who give game overs if they die seems a little bit excessive, so what I'm wondering is this. People who played Fire Emblem Awakening and know the mechanics of casual mode might remember that Lucina was a special case. She gave you a game over if she died on Classic mode, but not on casual. I'm wondering if that will be the case for the siblings on Phoenix mode. It feels like that may be the case, and just the Avatar would be the one who gives the game over if they die. Maybe Aqua as well. But enough speculating. They also said that on the Nor side, we will have specific mission objectives. You will still get a game over if you fail them. So there'll be things like defend missions, or they mentioned before that you have to reach a certain destination within a certain number of turns, maybe? That sounds like an arrive mission, actually, so that's coming back from Path of Radiance, interesting. But anyway, they have confirmed that yes, you can actually get game overs on Phoenix mode, so it's not completely effortless. Now, they also talk a little bit more about the new pair-up system. They mentioned that attack stance and guard stance now have a 100% activation rate when, quote, conditions have been met, unquote, and that it's the same for enemies. Now, they implied earlier that dual strikes are now 100% activation rate, but to compensate you don't get the boost from pairing up. However, does this mean that dual guards are now 100% chance? Because that sounds really overpowered. They did mention earlier that there was some kind of a guard meter that seems to decrease whenever a character dual guards attacks, so my guess is that dual guards are going to be limited somehow, but giving dual guards a 100% activation rate in guard stance does seem like it could be a little bit too strong. So I'm not sure what they're going to do about that. They also talk about the weapon system, and they said they specifically abolished the durability system to cater more to newcomers, which of course has had the super hardcore fans in the fan base utterly ballistic. Again, more flame wars. Basically, they're arguing that if they did do some kind of mechanic to appeal more to newcomers, they should have at least made it optional, like casual mode, because it seems that breakable weapons, it looks like they're gone for good on any difficulty or anything, really, so it is kind of annoying that people who want to play with breakable weapons don't have the option, but it does seem like the new mechanics of certain weapons making it harder to double attack or reducing enemy stats might still add an element of strategy. Speaking of which, they have also confirmed that javelins and hand axes can no longer double attack. This logically makes a lot of sense since, you know, when you throw a javelin or a hand axe, it doesn't just magically teleport back into your hand. I always found the animations associated with these weapons really silly in early games, especially axes. It was as if every single axe was a boomerang, and with lances, a new javelin would just teleport into the character's hand, so presumably they had a supply of like 25 javelins for each one and would just keep getting more of them. It always looked a little bit ridiculous, and the fact that they can't double attack actually does make a lot of sense, and would tone down some of these weapons. Now, note this only applies to those particular weapons. Ranged weapons for weapons that don't normally do ranged attacks. For bows and magic, presumably you can still double attack as normal. But maybe to compensate for this, they could maybe raise the might of hand axes and javelins a little bit, because they've been pretty drastically nerfed in terms of power at this point in the series, and really, they're kind of insanely weak. Especially hand axes. Those things are just a massive shadow of their former selves. Javelins too to an extent, but still. Their insanely low might makes them kind of really unappealing to use, so I hope they might buff them just a tiny bit if they're going to make it so that they can't double attack. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents on the issue. They've also confirmed that the game will feature even more characters than Awakening did, which does make a lot of sense. Awakening was very much in the style of Fire Emblem 4, having not as many characters as most Fire Emblem games, but making it so that all of them are very useful and unique, and all of them have a large amount of conversations. Now, I'm guessing they'll still keep the large amount of conversations in this one, but considering these games are going to be far more along the lines of traditional Fire Emblem games than Awakening was, I get the feeling there are going to be a lot more characters, especially seeing as there'll be some characters exclusive to different routes, so definitely a lot more characters in this game than Awakening did. I completely saw that coming, so that's pretty much fine. And then they talk a little bit about story. They say that this game takes place in a completely new world, which means that most likely there will be no ties to previous games in the series directly. What I mean by this is, the Fire Emblem series is very non-linear in terms of how its sequels work. Basically, you'll often have one game that gets one direct sequel, and those are pretty much the only games set within that world. So you have things like Mystery of the Emblem being a direct sequel to the first game, Awakening being a very, very distant sequel to the first game, but really, that's as far as it ever goes. You usually only get 2 or 3 games set within one particular universe, and from the looks of things, this new game is going to be in a completely different universe to anything we've seen previously, which I think is a good thing, although honestly I would really like to see another game in Sacred Stone's universe, because that was the only game in the series so far that does not have any other game that's linked to it. But anyway, I digress. They do say, though, there are going to be familiar elements that are sure to bring a smile to those who played Awakening. This most likely refers to story elements, not gameplay, because they've already talked about gameplay before. So I'm wondering what this means. They've already confirmed that the two kingdoms of Hoshidor and Nor are both linked to divine dragons in some way, so maybe there's still that thing regarding dragons that they've always been a big theme in the series, and chances are Naga is going to be still around somehow, because Naga's pretty much been the one recurring deity in the series. As for other elements that could be similar to Awakening, I'm not sure. Maybe the 5 orbs are returning. I don't know, they could be. That's just another one of those thematic mechanics Awakening had that you'd think might, translate to another world. The Fire Emblem itself, because for those of you who don't know, the Fire Emblem, the artifact the series is named after, is a different object in every universe. So chances are it will not be a shield like it is in Awakening and in Marth's games. But we don't really know much about that, but the 5 orbs could still be in it, I don't know. This is just pure speculation at this point. The most interesting thing that I found about their description of the story is that they gave a few more details on Nor's motivations. They said that Nor is subject to terrible weather conditions. Its castle is even in the middle of a giant hole in the ground, so it carries a very dark atmosphere and it's not your typical Western fantasy nation. It says they have poor crops and a lack of law and order, and in order to expand Nor's influence, King Garon orders his children to invade Hoshidor. And all of the royal siblings each have their own hidden thoughts, so chances are some of them might be conflicted about this. It's actually really interesting, and we're getting a lot of development to this side. It definitely doesn't seem like, even King Garon, who looks like this definitely not a villain, completely ominous, dark, evil man, turns out maybe his motivations aren't quite as villainous as we thought. Or at the very least, Nor still does have this moral ambiguity to it, even this guy who's probably going to be the main villain of most of them. And I like that. It does show that both sides do have good and bad elements to them. But one thing really intrigues me about this. The motivations of King Garon regarding Nor's state, especially the poor crops, this gives me a massive Thrakia vibe. So, for those of you who haven't played the 4th Fire Emblem game, this is actually kind of slightly spoilerish, but basically there's this country Thrakia that invades, it's actually more to do with the 5th game as well, but Leif is the heir of a kingdom called Leonster, or Leinster, or however you say it. It kind of keeps changing its spelling. And his country has a lot of fertile land. Now, its neighbour is Thrakia. Thrakia has incredibly poor crops. Their kingdom is in a huge state of poverty, and because of this, they invade Leonster in order to save their own nation. And their king Travant, that's his main motivation, and you don't find that out until quite a bit later once you've actually invaded their country. And it's interesting because, much like Garon, Travant himself seemed to be this completely evil psychopathic villain with no redeeming qualities at first. And eventually you found out that actually it wasn't as black and white as you thought. While he did do some pretty extreme things, he did have the good of his country in mind, which was suffering from extreme poverty. And if this interview is to be believed, it looks like Nor's motivations are very, very similar to that. So maybe even Garon, who again looks completely unambiguously evil, might not be as unambiguous as you'd think. So this is interesting. Next, they talk a little bit about classes. Now, as we've discussed in earlier videos, the Nor side has more typical Fire Emblem classes like Cavaliers. The Hoshidor side has a more Japanese flavour to its classes like ninjas and apparently samurai. From the looks of things, the samurai class is just a renamed version of Myrmidon, but I guess that sounds kinda cool. But the really big thing, and that's why I'm showing this screenshot of the infamous Tsubaki here, is the revelation that instead of Pegasus Knights, Hoshidor has a class called Pegasus Warrior, and we've seen that already as the name of Hinoka's class, one of the Avatar's Hoshidor siblings. But here's the big reveal. Unlike Pegasus Knights, Pegasus Warriors can be male as well as female. And with that, I think it's very likely that this person, Tsubaki, is in fact male. We could put aside all the gender debates. So, yeah, it seems like we have male Pegasus Riders, but it's actually not Pegasus Knight, it's a new class called Pegasus Warrior. Speaking of which, apparently Pegasus Warriors can use bows when they promote. And this is another weird moment where I have one of those psychic things that I kind of seem to be having this game sometimes. I was just thinking a little while ago, wouldn't it be cool if there was a flying class that used bows? And lo and behold, it happened. That has interesting prospects, being able to basically fly wherever you want to get into a good position to use ranged weapons, and again, male Pegasus Warriors does have some interesting implications. Maybe males can have Gale Force now. Now we get to the thing that I wanted to talk about the most by far out of this reveal, and that's how the reclassing system works now. We only have one screenshot of it and a brief description from the interview. But from this one screenshot, we can actually deduce a lot of information. Firstly, characters can still swap between different classes, but the item to do that is not a second seal, it's called a parallel seal this time. The parallel seal allows a character to change to a different class. However, as you can see in this screenshot, instead of resetting them to level 1, the character retains their current level. So this looks like a perfect way of preventing the brokenness that happened with Awakening's reclass system. Awakening's reclass system was a vast improvement over Shadow Dragon and New Mystery of the Emblem's reclass system, but it did result in a lot of horrible brokenness when it came to how it worked. By resetting yourself to level 1 or allowing promoted classes to unpromote themselves, you could basically level up endlessly and it totally broke the game. Here though, it looks like you'll use an item to reclass, so taking away one of the flaws of Shadow Dragon's system where you can just reclass at any time, but still you'll keep your level like in Shadow Dragon's reclass system. And also, from the looks of things, you cannot demote yourself with a second seal. You can only change between other classes within your own tier, so it's best to illustrate this by looking at the example. This is Joker here. He's currently a butler, but using a parallel seal, he has 3 class options: Paladin, Great Knight, and Strategist. Now, don't let the name fool you, Strategist is actually totally different to the Tactician class from Awakening. It's actually basically a renamed Valkyrie. It's a mounted class that uses staves and magic, and is apparently the promotion of Elisa's Rod Knight class. But here's the interesting thing, and this is why I said we can deduce a lot from this information. It looks as though characters only have access to 2 reclassing branches rather than 1. So we already know that Butler and Maid are promoted classes, so including that class that he's currently in, Joker has access to 4 classes. Now, presuming that Awakening system of each unpromoted class having 2 promotions is still in play, that means that he only has 2 unpromoted classes, and in fact he can't even switch those because he's already promoted. Those 2 classes from this look to be Rod Knight and Cavalier, seeing as he has both Paladin and Great Knight as options. Now, what this means is that Strategist is likely a promoted Rod Knight, but that means that Butler and Maid is likely the other promotion of Rod Knights. What this means is, the thing that a lot of people have been speculating in the comments section on my earlier videos is in fact true. Butler and Maid are this game's equivalent of War Monk and War Cleric, as a promotion of a healer class that now uses a physical weapon type. This is actually pretty interesting. So yeah, we've gone from nuns with axes to maids and butlers with knives. The other thing that seems to hint at these classes being the equivalents of War Monk and War Cleric is the skills. Now, we've already known before that Felicia the Maid has the Demoiselle skill, and that previously was exclusive to Troubadour. Now, if you look very closely at this guy's skills, and this is one thing that people haven't actually pointed out yet, so I may be the first person to actually do this. I'm probably not, but yeah, I wanted to point this out. Look very closely at Joker's skills there. Look at that blue heart skill. That's, yeah, the first one on the bottom row. Doesn't that look an awful lot like a blue version of Demoiselle to you? It looks like Demoiselle finally has a male counterpart, which is interesting. So basically, if that's to be believed, then this skill would boost the accuracy and evasion of all female allies within a 3-space radius of the user. So yeah, Joker is a chick magnet in universe, apparently. And this does lend credence to the theory that this class is a promotion of an equivalent of Troubadour, which would be Rod Knight, although it looks like Rod Knights fight on foot in this game. So, like I said, you can deduce a lot of information from this small amount of info. So, basically it looks like characters only have access to 2 promotion branches this time. And this can be observed when we look at another screenshot, and this one's much lower quality, of Felicia's class options. She's currently a maid, and as you can see, she has the options Brave Hero, Bow Knight, or Strategist. Now, just like Joker, she has the Strategist option, which leads me to believe that, once again, Maid is likely a promotion of Rod Knight. So that's her first class branch, Rod Knight. Now, her other options are Brave Hero and Bow Knight. This seems to imply that her second class branch is in fact Mercenary. So, that's very interesting. I wouldn't expect her to have that class branch of all things, but it looks like Felicia has access to the Rod Knight and Mercenary class branches, but that's all. So, from the looks of things, characters only have 2 class branches and not 3 like they did in Awakening, which might help make the reclass system a little less broken. Now, the other interesting thing is, though, regarding skills. If a character's level doesn't reset on reclassing, does that mean you have to be much more careful with when you reclass if you want to have access to certain skills? Maybe. There was a similar thing that happened with this in Tiering Saga, where if you promoted certain characters too early, they would actually miss out on certain skills. So it could be in play here. The other alternative is that if a character reclasses to another class option, they automatically gain all the skills they would have had at that class's level. So, for example, assuming that promoted classes still learn 1 skill at level 5 and 1 at level 15, if you raise someone to level 20 in a promoted class and then use a parallel seal to switch to a different one, maybe you would immediately learn both the skills associated with that other class? I don't know, because characters still have 5 skill slots, so chances are you'll still be able to collect skills from different classes like you could in Awakening, but we don't really know how it's going to work now. Now, the other interesting part about this is, while they do confirm that there are parallel seals that work like this, they have not stated whether or not second seals are back. It's still possible that second seals might still exist, but if they did, I get the feeling they would be exclusive to Hoshidor, because that's the only campaign that actually allows you to grind outside of the main story. Second seals would be pretty pointless in Nor when experience overall is limited. Now, we had a second batch of information revealed, and most of the stuff was things that were already revealed in the Famitsu interview that I've already talked about, but we did find out one more thing, and this is another instance where I'm going to have to yell out, I called it, I called it, I called it! Now, remember back in, I think it was the second video of these analysis that I did, where I said that characters have one skill that is in a larger circle than all the others, a 6th skill slot. And I speculated that because enemies didn't have it, that it was a specific skill unique to each individual character, as in every individual character had their own unique personal skill. Well, guess what? I was right! I was 100% right! They have revealed that every character in the game now has their own unique personal skill. And this, I love this! This has got to be one of my favourite things that I've heard announced about this game so far. And we've already got a description of a few of these skills already, so let's go through some of them. The Avatar's is apparently Mysterious Charm, which, when you're supporting a character who has at least a C support, their accuracy is boosted by 10, damage by 2, and damage received reduced by 2. So basically it's just another one of your typical main character has lots of social supports, yeah, is good at making bonds and power of friendship and all that stuff. But considering that the Avatar will likely be able to support with everyone, this should be a very useful skill. Desperate Struggle is Hinata, and well, she's the character that I showed previously. Actually, wait a minute, no. Actually, Hinata's a guy. I'm used to having Hinata as a girl's name, so anyway. He was a samurai, and he's used to illustrate how the promotion system works. It's confirmed that samurai promote to true blades, which are pretty much just renamed swordmasters, or weapon masters, a new class that uses swords, axes, and lances. Now, initially I thought this class sounded a bit too overpowered, but thinking about it, all three of these weapon types have now gained an additional weakness, which means that actually, maybe it is kind of balanced. So anyway, Hinata's unique skill is Desperate Struggle, which basically acts like counter, except it only works on physical weapons, and it only counters back half damage, and it only works when you're on a half HP or less. It could combine well with Vantage, but it definitely seems like they're trying to tone down counter, because it was a little bit ridiculous in Awakening. Elfie's unique skill is Superpower, which increases damage dealt to enemies when your strength is at least 5 points higher than the enemy's. This sounds a lot like a strength version of the Berserker's Colossus skill in Path of Radiance, so this does sound like it could be pretty useful. Harold, a character from Nor, who people have already started nicknaming Gaston, I do see the resemblance, definitely. And interestingly enough, he's actually a fighter. I expected him to be a mercenary, but yeah, turns out he's actually a fighter. He apparently believes himself to be a hero of justice. I pretty much had that idea from just looking at him before. But he apparently suffers from extremely bad luck, and his unique skill is called Unlucky Soul, which reduces the user's critical evade by 5, but enemies within a 2-tile radius have their critical evade, also reduced by 15. So it's kind of a gamble, a bit of a risk versus reward thing. And, okay, I'm gonna have to go and do this. No one's luck attracts critical hits like Harold's. Yeah, I had to do that. Honestly though, as useful as this could be, especially later on when -5 to critical evade is not that big a deal, I may avoid using this guy specifically because of this skill, because an extra 5% chance of being critical is a chance that I don't want to take. If you've seen how I play Awakening, I like to reduce my my chance of being critical as much as possible, so I get the feeling I'm not actually going to like this guy in gameplay, sorry guys. We also have Oboro, and they were revealed in an earlier piece of information that I analysed. I forgot to mention them, but it's a good thing that I did, because now we know a lot more about them. So, Oboro is a Lancer, which presumably is a Hoshido version of the Soldier and Halberdier classes from Path of Radiance, so I'm glad those are returning. If you look at their stats there, you'll see that it definitely looks like they're a lot like they were in Path of Radiance. Very balanced all around, having relatively decent stats in strength, skill, speed, and defense. So I'm glad this class is returning. I really liked it back in Path of Radiance. Well, it has a different name, but oh well. And there was a debate as to their gender, but apparently they have a crush on Takumi, which means they are most likely female. Their unique skill is called Nor Hater, which increases damage against Nor enemies. So yeah, they seem to have a thing for, they don't really like people from Nor. Reminds me a lot of some of the personal skills of Valkyria Chronicles. There were quite a few characters who had personal skills where they hated the enemy country that you were fighting. The interesting thing that I find about this class, though, is they've revealed a few of its class skills, and one of them in particular sounds really, really interesting. Well, firstly there's Defense Seal, which reduces the enemy's defense by 6 after you hit them. Now, 6 is a very huge number, so I'm wondering if this is an activation rate skill. I'm guessing it is, because reducing the enemy's defense by 6 every time you attack them seems a bit overpowered. But the other skill is the most interesting to me. This skill is Substitute, which allows the user to swap places with an adjacent unit. They say it could be useful for keeping wounded allies out of harm's way, but here's the thing that I'm most interested in. The description of this skill does not specifically say that it only works on allies. It says on the target units. Does this mean you can swap places with enemies as well as allies? This actually sounds like it could have some really interesting tactical applications. For example, getting rid of an enemy guarding a choke point by just pulling it off there. Or, this is my personal favourite application, pulling enemies off of defensive terrain to make attacking them with other characters easier. No more fort bonuses for you! It likely won't work on enemies on thrones, because that would be a little bit cheap. You could just pull them off and then seize or something like that, but if it does work on enemies, like I said, this could be a very interesting skill. The only other personal skill that we know of belongs to a character called Tsukuyomi. Now, we haven't actually seen them yet. They're apparently a mage belonging to the Wind Clan, whereas Rinka, the Oni from earlier, she belongs to the Fire Clan. My guess is, and a lot of people's other guess, is that Tsukuyomi is the Merrick-type mage character who specializes in wind magic. But they have a personal skill apparently called Arrogance, which acts a lot like Underdog. When your level is lower than the enemy's level, damage increases by 4, so instead of increasing accuracy and evasion, it increases actual damage. So there are a lot of damage increasing skills I've noticed, a lot more than there were in Awakening, so that's kind of interesting. Anyway, that's pretty much all the info that I wanted to mention this time. This video has gone on a bit long, but I really like a lot of the things that have been revealed so far, especially character-specific unique skills. That is awesome. I really, really like that, and I look forward to seeing what unique skills every character has. I'm just hoping that none of them are bad, like Valkyria Chronicles, but they probably won't be. So, I guess I'll see you the next time we find out some more information. So, this is Big Clinky signing off.